today's presentation or webinar on questions to Paul Coleman. It is Wednesday, September 30th. Like I mentioned, we are here for questions to Paul Coleman. And for those that didn't know, Paul is the building official for one of the largest building departments in California. Today, if you've registered for this webinar, you will have access to today's presentation, a PDF copy of it, and you will also have access to copies of the Tips from the Experts, a guide from working on OSHPD projects. We will be here for a total of 30 minutes. 10 minutes of that is going to be an actual presentation with a 20-minute open mic question and answer to Mr. Paul Coleman. So you will all be muted during the presentation. At the end, you will have an opportunity to virtually raise your hand and with the hand next to your name on the GoToVirtual webinar toolbox there. So when we call on you, please feel free to unmute yourself as we will unmute you on our end. If we do have transmission difficulties, please be sure to log off and then log back in using the same link that was sent to you. We will have an opportunity to hear from you and questions or clarifications that you're looking for. If you have special circumstances or specific questions about a specific project, we've said this before, so please feel free to reach out to your regional compliance officer, your district structural engineer, or your fire life safety officer, as they are wonderful resources for you out in the field. If you have any general questions or questions about this webinar after we get off this webinar, please send an email to oshpod.fddisu@oshpod.ca.gov. So today for a presenter, we have Mr. Paul Coleman, as I mentioned before, OSHPD Deputy Director, and for question and answer portion of it, we will have the Inspection Services Unit team, which will be able to answer general questions regarding anything you might want to know about. So Paul, with that being said, I hand the mic over to you.
Well, thank you, Caesar, for that introduction. So we have a couple of things to discuss today with you. First of all, I think all of you know about the Facilities Development Division and what our goals and responsibilities are. Our goals and responsibilities and jurisdiction is actually dictated by law, by statute, the Alfred E. Alquist Hospital Facility Seismic Safety Act gives us our authority for our jurisdiction, as well as defines roles and responsibilities of many of the stakeholders with whom we engage and work with. So this tells you that the Facilities Development Division regulates the design and construction of healthcare facilities to ensure they are safe and capable of providing services to the public. And of course, we're a little bit different than most building departments in that in addition to enforcing the codes, we also write or promulgate the building codes for hospitals. And I would like to encourage all of you to be part of that process as we're getting ready to enter into the next building code cycle. We just finished up the 2019 mid-cycle. Now we'll be going into the 2022 building code cycle. So if you'd like to participate, we would encourage that. This is our vision, our mission, and our values. And this is the vision and the mission is OSHPD wide, and as are the values. And these values, that we have 8 of them, and those are the guiding values for our work: communication, accountability, service, professionalism, integrity, respect, innovation, teamwork, and community. Now, as Caesar mentioned, we have this guide that's available as part of this webinar today, and that's what I'm going to use as my talking points today. Because in order to have a successful project, you have to have the right tools to work with. And I thought I had removed all of those advancements, so I will go back to this page. This started off as the best practices manual a number of years ago, for those of you who recall that manual. And it was funded and published by the California Healthcare Foundation. It was done jointly with CHA, CSHI, and OSHPD. And then we got to realizing that it was a little long in the tooth and a lot of things were outdated. We went back to the owner of the copyright and asked them if we could have permission to revise it, which they did grant, and we revised it under this new name, because what's the best practice for, like, say, a small project may not be the same best practice for a larger, more complex project. So we wanted to get rid of the term best practices because those are so varied. And instead, we decided to develop it as a guide. And we wanted tips from the experts. So we searched high and low, and we were able to come up with 2 experts. So from that, we have now developed this. And this will kind of show you the major topics that are in this guide. And you can see by looking at this how important this can actually be. It goes all the way from the very beginning with the geologic hazards investigation, and all the way up through the closeout of the project and what it needs to occur at each of the different steps along the way, and has guidelines for the designers, for the inspectors, for the our staff when it comes to observation, also the TIO, also for the builder or the contractor as well. As I mentioned, this defines all these roles and responsibilities, and I've kind of gone through here and put just the table of contents up for you to look at to see how thorough this manual or this guide actually is as far as what it covers and the detail that it goes into, even to the point of on drawings, giving recommendations of how they should be arranged, what information should be shown on particular drawings, and so forth. Now, we do know that this manual is, again, getting a little outdated because this was done back in 2013, I believe. And since that time, we have incorporated electronic plan review and many other methods, collaboration review, and so forth, that is not really covered in this manual today. So we will be working on, and we are working on with the Hospital Building Safety Board and our stakeholders on updating this manual so that it stays current with our practice as it changes. And now with the this COVID-19, we find that our practices change even more once again as we get more and more into teleworking environment and what can be done offsite and other manners than what we have typically done it. And how can we incorporate some of that into the way we work with you folks and our own folks internally as well. And so we will also be including that in our update as we move forward. And as I said, you can see in here, we have sections for the inspector of record. Section 4 has some guidelines as far as duties, what you should be doing and the manner it should be done, as well as the sections covering the design professional of record, who is actually oversees and develops the testing and inspection observation program. That is one of the key tools that is used on the job site to ensure that adequate and competent inspection is being done as we move forward on the project. So here's just some guidance that the design professional of record has very specific duties and responsibilities established not only by the law, but it's also covered in our regulations as well. And the same with the inspector of record and the contractor, all have duties and responsibilities as defined in the law and that we have incorporated in regulations. So with all of that background, we decided to see if we could find an expert to provide you with a tip today. And so the tip is that the program works exceptionally well if each participant is performing their duties and responsibilities as required for their role in the Hospital Facilities Seismic Safety Act, the Title 24 administrative regulations, and using the tips for the expert guide. And so we showed the expert here that we used, and some people have already questioned which one was really the true expert in this picture, whether it was the one on the right or the left. I'll let you make that call or that decision on your own. So if this doesn't happen, if everyone's not doing their part and their role that they are intended to be doing, then that's when the projects go off the rails or off the tracks. And then we, once they get off, it becomes very difficult to get them back on. I think that owners need to realize that they are the pivotal part of the team, and they are the ones with the vision and the desire to have something constructed and built. And so they need to be actively engaged all the way through the project. And when we have owners engaged, we find that the project does go better. And if the design professionals are doing their job as far as the construction observation at the stages that they should be doing as defined in the TIO, and also that they're administering the TIO and overseeing it and working with the inspector of record, who also understands their responsibility to work under the direction of the design professional as well. Then the job will go much more smoothly. And as long as the contractor also realizes that they need to build the project in accordance with the approved documents or the approved drawings. And as long as everyone is doing their part, their duty and responsibility as required, you'll find that the projects go so much smoother, and they can be built on time, or in some cases ahead of time, and on budget or under budget. So we want to work with you on getting there. And with that, I think.
So before we go on to these three questions here, I do want to encourage everybody on this webinar to go ahead and type your question into the GoToWebinar question box. And if you don't want to type your question in, please feel free to raise your hand virtually by clicking that little hand next to your name on the GoToWebinar panel. So, Paul, these are some of the questions that we received prior to today. So I'll go ahead and read the question, and hopefully you can provide an answer. Structural changes during construction on an OSHPD project are extremely time consuming, even if the change is minor. If OSHPD wants to make a significant change to improve the efficiency of construction and reduce paperwork, why don't they change the code to expand the use of material altering for structural items and let the SEOR make the call? The owners and industry need less ACDs and more options for non-materially altering.
Well, I agree with wholeheartedly with one statement here, is that the owners and industry need less ACDs. ACDs end up being about 2/3 of our work as far as numbers of submittals. And we would definitely love to see that number come down because they require a lot more effort than the fees could possibly cover in most cases. As far as what can be materially altered and not non-materially altering, it has to do with also the responsibilities and so forth in statute, as well as the building code. And so to the extent possible, we have 8 specific areas that are non-materially altered work in the administrative code. And so as long as the work falls within those 8 areas, then it is automatically considered non-materially altered work. To go beyond that, that's a judgment call. And that's something that, in this case, the district structural engineer should be working with the SEOR. And the SEOR can make calls to the DSE. And we have, like I say, electronic submittals that can be made back and forth. They can have virtual meetings, whatever, to resolve some of these issues. And to the extent that they can be resolved without an ACD, so much the better, because that keeps the project moving along, as well as reduces some of that ACD work in the office, so that new projects can get reviewed more timely and permitted, to make sure that these projects can move forward as quickly as possible. However, there are certain areas in the code that we cannot say it would be a non-materially alter, especially if it starts requiring structural calculations and other justification to prove the adequacy of the design.
Great, thank you for that. We will continue with the next questions here, and we do have some more coming in on the GoToWebinar question box here, so we appreciate those questions. Next question, Paul, for you is the latest document published, 2016 Electrical Guide for Health Facilities. Do you know when the revised version of the 2019 California Electrical Code edition currently being enforced is going to be released? The 2019 code went into effect January of 2020.
Yes, it did go into effect. And our senior electrical engineers are currently working on revising that document. And they're working at a shockingly fast pace to get that done. And I have been assured that it should be ready for publication and release in October. And it's my understanding in the conversations with them is that they were talking about October of 2020. So it should be done within the next few weeks.
Great, thank you for that. So Paul, as you know, there are several key staff that are nearing or have already retired. What is OSHPD's succession plan and or training plan to build up current staff to a leadership level?
Okay, I really appreciate this question because this gives me the opportunity to do a recruitment. I want to tell you that on our website, we do list open positions and also give information regarding the minimum qualifications for those positions. I would like to encourage every one of you listening today, if you're not currently an OSHPD employee with FDD, this is your opportunity to consider becoming one. So go there and look and see if your training, your background, your experience meets those minimum qualifications, and get that application in as soon as possible. And we would like to encourage you to do that. But yes, you are correct that much of our staff are retirement eligible age, and we do have a number that have retired over the last year or two, with more, I'm sure, that are planning to in the near future. So we do continue to try to recruit very aggressively. We will be contacting many of you and pleading with you to come to work with us because I think that we are the #1 department to work for in the state of California if you want to become a state employee. This is definitely the place to come to.
Great, Paul. Thank you for that. And we have more questions, and I do want to go ahead and share my own sentiments. I'm fairly new to OSHPD, and I can attest to what Paul just mentioned, that it is a great department to work for if you'd like, or have at all entertained the idea of coming to work for state government. So next question, Paul, for you is any comment/insight on proposed California state SB 758 legislation for extension of 2030 seismic deadline?
I can tell you that SB 758 never made it to the governor's office, so it never became law. It died in the legislature. The author and the sponsor decided not to move it forward at the last moment, and so there is no extension beyond 2030 at this time.
Great, thank you. We do have another question for you, Paul. It says, can you point to where to find the quote unquote description of responsibilities and duties of owner in context with the slide that shows a snapshot for DPOR, IOR, contractor, speed reading through the table of content? Possibly it's right in front of me.
Yeah, there's several places that talk to that about that. If you go through like I said, the Hospital Facility Seismic Safety Act, it gives the owner certain responsibilities, such as they can't proceed with the work unless they have approved plans, unless they have a permit. Permits cannot be issued by the office unless certain criteria are met. And any work that the owner does without a permit is automatically void, and the owner by law is not allowed to pay contractors or builders or anyone for work that is not permitted in their facility. And so there definitely are requirements for owners in the law, as well as in the
What do you think about?
do what?
I'm sorry, there's someone who has unmuted themselves. So if you can please mute yourself, that'd be great. So I'm sorry, Paul, could you please go ahead?
I just all I'm saying is that in the regulations and in the statute, there are responsibilities for owner, and this is all reflected in the guide. The tips from the experts that I mentioned will help you to know what those duties and responsibilities are.
Great, thank you. So Paul, on an optimal level and vision or a wish list, what are the top transformational procedures and processes that can be achieved to enhance the efficiency of the OSHPD industry and stakeholders?
Well, I think one of the things that would be very transformational is if everyone stepped up and performed their roles and responsibilities as already defined, because so many times we see where that does not occur. And, nature abhors a vacuum. So if the design professional is not doing what they should do on the job, then a lot of times that will fall onto the IOR to do. And if the IOR is not doing what they should be doing, then that falls on our field staff, and on and on. So one of the things is, as everyone's stepping up and doing their role, their responsibilities, and so forth, we're also looking at, as I mentioned earlier, what can be done going forward? What have we learned from COVID-19 as far as manners in which we can do business? Are there ways that it can be done in a more technical manner and so forth? So we're going to be continue to looking into those areas, as well as looking at what building codes need to be revised as a result of lessons learned. We have a task force that has been established for that purpose. And we have inspectors of record on the task force working with us, as well as all the other stakeholders that we work with are being represented on the task force. And so we're going to be looking at what ways the manners in which we can be more transformational in the manners in which we do our business going forward.
Great, thank you, Paul, for that. We do have, this is going to be the last question unless we get more typed in, or some of you want to raise your hand and have an open dialogue with Paul. Now's your chance. Remember, this is the building official for one of the largest building departments in California. So please feel free to raise your hand virtually on the GoToWebinar control panel there, or type your question in so we can have that discussion and get your questions answered. So Paul, unless we see more questions or some hands raised, this is going to be the last question for you. What can an IOR do when they are being replaced for following the duties and responsibilities of an IOR?
Well, I was a certified inspector of record back before joining OSHPD. I'd had a number of different responsibilities as an architect of record, as an inspector of record, and so forth. And I think a lot of what the IOR needs to do is work with the OSHPD field staff, especially in areas where work is not going in the manner it should, that a lot of times our field staff can assist in getting those areas created. But as far as the owner, if they, ultimately the inspector of record works for the owner, because the way it works is that whoever pays your paycheck, that is your ultimate boss. And so even though you report to the architect of record and you're responsible to OSHPD, to our field staff, you also have to look at the owner as being your ultimate boss. And so they may or may not terminate you. I've seen over the years where an inspector of record was terminated because they were doing their job in the manner that it should be. They were calling out discrepancies. They were calling out things that need to be corrected, to the point where the owner felt it was adversely impacting the schedule and the cost of the project, and wanted to get rid of that inspector. Now, when they do that, that often causes our field staff to have to step up and look at things a lot more focused, and kind of watch a little bit more as to what went on there. And then we can work with the inspector of record, and as far as on other jobs that they may have available or could come up with. I think that in order to do anything more than that, there were a number of bills over the years that have been floated. Some of them I think were good, and some of them were maybe not so good with regards to the inspector of record program. And one of them was that owners could not terminate an inspector of record without the approval of OSHPD. And that bill did not go through and was not approved. So we don't have that authority. Ultimately, the owner is the one who hires the inspectors of record, and they have the ability then to who they're going to hire and who they're going to let go, and for whatever reason that may be.
Perfect, thank you. And I think that bill would have been great. So Paul, we do have someone who's raised their hand. So Yusef, if you can unmute yourself, I'm gonna unmute you. We'd like to hear from you and what you have to say. So go ahead and unmute yourself so we can have an open dialogue and a discussion. Yusef? Yusef, are you there? Okay, can't seem to hear you. Yusef, if you're there, I don't hear you. But if you'd like to type your question into the GoTo panel, we definitely like to hear from you and what your question is. So with that, while Youssef types his question in, I'd like to point something out that although these dates are to be determined, we as OSHPD will be presenting in the future presentations on existing building code and renovations, the California Energy Code for healthcare facilities, accessibility 2-11B, and functional programs. So Youssef, it sounds like you may have unmuted yourself. I hear keys rattling and whatnot. There. Okay. I'll go ahead and so if you did not get a chance to ask a question or raise your hand, or maybe you have a question that comes to mind after this webinar, please feel free to email us at oshpod.fddisu@oshpod.ca.gov. Again, that's oshpd.fddisu@oshpod.ca.gov. And again, I do want to remind you that we do have a wonderful field staff out there, whether it's your regional compliance officer, district structural engineer, or fire life safety officer, that are great resources for you for those hard projects, difficult projects, and specific projects and specific issues that are more than willing and happy to answer any questions you may have. Also, before we end this webinar, do want to point out that we will in fact be sending out a survey, because this is the last scheduled presentation. We'll be sending out a survey to all who have participated in the FBA 10s, or Field Brief Advice 10s, to ask how OSHPD can improve these FBA 10s. So please take some time to complete the survey and let us know what you'd like OSHPD to present on, as we will be using this survey to develop the next series of FBA 10s. So I'll give once a look over for more hands if I don't see any, and any more questions typed in, which I don't. With that being said, I do want to take this time. We have about a minute left, so I think we did great on time. Do want to take this time to thank you for participating in this first series of FBA 10s, and we will hopefully be having a second series of FBA 10s in the near future. So until then, please, thank you for attending, and until then, stay safe and stay healthy. And thank you, Paul, for joining us.